and quality money. Okay, that's what we want for this Father's Day. Okay, don't say, are you not going to take us out? We are not taking anybody out today. You guys should take us out. Okay, when did it change? Well, the Association of New Fathers, they had a Congress. And at the Congress yesterday, we changed it. So they said I should disseminate the information. So don't tell us you don't know now. Don't tell us you don't know. So good, all of them, they were at the Congress. So it's act of money. One, love language. It's not act of service. For us, number two, physical money. It's not physical touch. We are tired of touch. Words of money. Don't want words of affirmation. Receiving money. Then quality money. That's what we want. So you guys have heard. Well, if you've joined the meeting, please kindly do the broadcast, send to your friends, get them to this meeting. I think that should be our norm right now. We don't have to cajole you to do that. There's so much value that we're bringing, and you need to get your friends on board so that they don't totally miss out of this. They're saying there's virtual pop-off and Zobo for the first timers. Okay, today is a very special day, and I mean, fathers, please let's know that it's a call to progress and not a call to perfection. We bleed, we struggle, we do stuff. Sometimes we fall flat on our faces, but it doesn't invalidate your father, right? Many of you are bleeding to make life easy for other people. Sometimes I'm in my house and I feel the burden I carry. I see the people I reach out to every day, praise this, PF from all over the continents of the world. Sometimes my body is fighting me. Like I was almost going to break down last week because I couldn't understand what my body was saying to me. I couldn't understand. So when I called my doctor said, praise, it's jet lag, all right? Say you grow older right now, so it takes a longer time for the jet lag to wear out. Because apparently my body was still, thinking Nigeria. Meanwhile, I was back across from Canada, a different time zone, to Dallas, a different time zone, all within a space of 1 week, thereabout. Sometimes it's very tough, but we have to keep showing up and we have to keep loving. It's a call for a lifetime. Say share. No, we're not saying share. But please share the link with your friends, invite them to this meeting. Right, today, this month, we are doing industry analysis. We're breaking down every sector, of human influence. And today we are moving to the educational sector. Education is so important. And on House of Saviors today, I have my brother, my friend, someone who really knows these onions when it comes to the educational sector. He's an educational strategist, he's a trainer, he's a consultant. It's always a joy to work with him. If I have any project that is education related, I can literally hand it over to him because he knows exactly what to do in that sphere, in that sector. There are people who just beat about the bush. They don't understand. They can't implement. They just talk and talk. He can implement, right? So I respect him so much. And while we were planning for this particular meeting, we had to say, okay, it had to be Rotimi. Please, House of Saviors, go to the chat box. Welcome with me, Rotimi Eyitayo. Please, let's celebrate him.
Thank you.
He's a secret member of House of Saviors. He will sneak in and sneak out. Maybe now he will be a full member. Rotimi, you're welcome. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, House of Saviors, what's happening? Are you guys doing something? Okay, good. You guys are responding because it looks like we're slow to respond today. Maybe you guys are, maybe it's the love languages I shared for men that is scaring our women. Okay, don't worry. You guys are more than able. Maybe you've been collecting our money all this while. So let us also chop your money this time around. Okay, Rotimi, so we've been doing industry analysis, breaking down the various sectors and the opportunities that are within the sectors globally. Last week we had Fisayo Okunsoya. Network was bad, but Fisayo delivered some kind of stuff that a lot of people never had before on how to engage power, how to function in the place of policy. It just totally broke certain tables that our beliefs, our concept of right and wrong has prevented us from enjoying. Right. And so today we are making a stopover at the educational sector. And education is a very simple terminology, but also very controversial, And so I'm going to start with the question to me, what is education? And why is education so important? Right. Let me start
Thank
from
you. Thank you very much. And many thanks for hosting me. So when you look at education, education is a composite concept where you think about it as a process. You must understand that education is first a process. Education is also an infrastructure. That's why a lot of times you hear people say education in itself is the mother of all sectors. And the reason behind that is because you cannot go further into the world of education without establishing the purpose of education. In fact, the meaning of education is derived from the purpose of education. And while we have so many definitions, I would say that education is the infrastructure with which we birth creativity and economy. So if you're going to balance it that way, you say that you now find out that the reason that's why sometimes people say you've got to get an education, thinking about it as an experience, but also as an infrastructure under a process tied together.
Education is the infrastructure with which we birth innovation and the economy. Okay, you have in your introduction, you have almost thrown up you fired some bullets almost immediately. But I won't come to the bullets so that I'll come back there later so that you can unpack them. I know that when people talk about education, the first thing that goes to our mind is school, right? That's the first thing that goes to our mind. But can you differentiate between education and schooling? And can someone actually go to school and not be educated?
Absolutely. That's a very good one. So we must understand that school and the school system, they are the driver, one of the drivers of education. And if you think about school in itself, you will realize that school can actually be seen from formal and informal. So you hear people say that I come from the streets. The streets philosophy and engagement in itself is a schooling of some sort. And that's why you find out that if you think about medieval history, think about the fact around historical fact before modernization, you'll see several people being schooled in their art and in their culture. And then, of course, because of the amalgamation of industry, we began to see the emphasis on formal education, which actually is driven for acceptance and alignment of an agenda. Predominantly, you could see from the education system we've adopted in Nigeria, it is patterned after the colonial era, which was basically to serve the purpose of industry. But then when we think about education, then I need to stress the purpose of it. Number one, the purpose of education is to create a future. And then the ultimate purpose of education is to prepare people for a future. So those two things, right, becomes the framework with which you define anything called education, which is why if anybody goes through a system, formal or informal, and is not prepared for the future, or he cannot create the future, then he's not gotten any form of education at all. Whether he was enrolled in an enterprise called a school, or he was submerged and immersed in an environment which we also call a school. Formal or informal, the outcome of any form of education should be that you are able to prepare people for the future, or you are able to create the future itself.
Wow. Now you have you just made a very dangerous statement, right? And I've always said to people that every sane nation I know, before they create any educational policy or create any curriculum or whatever, the first question they're asking is, who do we want our people to become and how do we want them to think, right? So what you're saying right now, my mind is quickly racing back to Nigeria and the kind of education we got to say, what future did this prepare us for? It looks like an average person I know, by the time they are leaving school, they are confused. At least, maybe, we don't have data, but I can safely say that at the point of leaving the university, maybe 60 to 7% can't state clearly what future they want, where they want to go. And that's very scary. Would I then be right to say that maybe Nigeria was out of that WhatsApp system where they are asking this question of create a future, prepare people for the future, because even that is even more dangerous, because the question now comes, what kind of future? Because you can be prepared for a future of slavery or servitude or a future of confusion. And this is scary for me, hearing it from you. Now, if you do a comprehensive analysis of Nigeria, because many of African education system as we have it right now, what is it preparing us for? What future is it creating in us? Rotimi.
Okay, so the truth about it is, if I was to be honest, our education is not preparing us for anything. And that's why you see we emphasize an unknown future. In the real spec of things, the future really is not unknown. Because if you think about the communication at the World Economic Forum, Davos, and all those things, they begin to share the in-demand scale of 2030, 2050, which pretty much means that there's a glimpse of the future. Why? Because they create the future. Now, most of the time, the future is unknown to those who are the recipient of it. And so what we are now doing is we are having what you call the catch-up education. We see others do, and then we are aligned to copy. And that in itself is not a form of preparation, because you don't even have any position of leverage or vantage. And so you find that sometimes, even when we do what the world is doing, we are not able to gather leverage from that thing, because in itself we didn't prepare. What is the leverage behind that? And that's why sometimes what the only thing that a lot of people can lay claim on as they graduate in the school system, and I'd like to start stressing some words: system, model. You start hearing the fact that our system guarantees one thing, that if you go through formal education, especially within the private venture education, you will see things like numeracy, you see things like literacy, meaning that you are able to count, you are able to read, which in itself is a good drawdown value. It's a low-hanging fruit. But when you think about the ultimate value of education, you find out that most of the time we would have gone through a cycle of 6 to 12 years of knowing everything about other things except ourselves. Unfortunately, we get to discover this truth at the tertiary level, where we're supposed to be at the place of mastery, where we've moved away from the activity of things and we are now getting to understand the science of how things work. And so that's why, number one, a lot of people begin to say that the biggest problem that we have is that we are out of system. We're not even in a system. We are out of system. That's why we can't predictively profile who a Nigerian graduate is or who an educated Nigerian is. So typically, if you go to school, you are just being raised to have the appetite of a hustler, looking for the next biggest thing by favor or by fastest fingers. So it's not orchestrated in any form.
Well, by favor or by fastest finger, Rotimi. And that will bring me to the question, from what you said, it would then mean that education is supposed to produce thinkers who can question, right? Now, but our system, our culture forbids questioning. I remember I was supposed to take a master's degree. I think, is it Unilag? I think it was Unilag. I gained admission, public policy or something, many years ago, 2003 or so. And I think by the second class, I just went introductory class. I'd not even paid school fees. I'd asked 2 questions and the lecturer told me point blank that I may not graduate if I continue to ask the kind of questions I was asking. Now, I'd endured the torture of first degree where I couldn't ask questions in class. Then here am I going for masters and I still couldn't ask questions. So I, by myself, left that school. And that was the last time I was in, any formal school in Nigeria. Now, again, you look at the platforms for, in quote, education or liberating people, because education is supposed to liberate people in Africa. And so you have the school system, you have the religious system, now, which is a 2-core system that, in quote, is out there as, we are liberating people, we're liberating. But those 2 systems forbid questioning. They can't stand questioning. So how do we then create a future when you can't question, when all we just do is whatever you say to us, we take it. Whatever you say to us, we say amen. Whatever you say to us, we even curriculum is set. And I'll give an example. I mean, this is a joke, but it reminds me of the challenges we are having. A teacher was asking a boy, 1 minus 1 is what? And the boy couldn't answer, right? And the teacher, tried her best to make the boy understand, and the boy still couldn't answer. So the teacher created a scenario, asked the boy, what's your favorite food? And the boy said, pop-off. And the teacher said, okay, if I put one pop-off, puff-puff in your hand, and I collect it back, what do you have left? The boy said, oil. And the teacher began to beat the boy. Now, thinking about it, what does the boy have left? Oil. But curriculum has said, it must be 0. But there is something left on his hand. So you look at that example, and it tells you that it looks like we always love to say, this is the only way. So when someone within that system challenges that way, it becomes a rebel. How does this concept of you can't question, how does it then produce educated people, especially within the African context?
Thank you very much. I think that in fairness to people who have championed education, either from the faith-based circles or from the school sector, the challenge that they actually have is that they put content before experience. So there's always a question of contextuality. So they are actually right because there's an answer that is pre-modal, is almost like it's preset, which is true. But a dead clock is right twice a day. And so when you think about it, they are correct, but the child is also correct. Why? Because there are different perspectives to it. But when you put content before context, when you put content, because if you look at our Nigerian education system, it is heavy in content. That's why we read and sometimes get to cram. That's why you see that we exalt examination as opposed to project-based learning. You find out that the ultimate is the exam as opposed to the immersion in the classroom. And that when we go outside the country, a lot of Nigerians ace the academic contest. So if you put Nigerians into a class for exams, we will get first class. But the truth about it is that the integration of learning is going to be a big gap. People don't get any first class. Why? Because already learning for them was experiential. And it is in experience that we have our own truth. It's in experience that validation for questioning comes. Just like you normally say, praise. If you ask question, you definitely have answers. So if you ask the right question, you definitely have the right answer. But imagine where content is the answer, meaning that you must follow through this, leave your thought and questioning behind, accept and go through it, eventually then figure it out. And most of the time, that's why a lot of people say, who's school help? Because we're not seeing the correlation of the things we've learned or the things we've been instructed upon and the real life integration. You understand? So most times people just feel that school is almost like a critical success factor to be considered as part of the same in society. And those who become outliers and defy the odds and still go on to make success of their life now become a case study to look at, because there are people who did not finish the formal education and then they disprove the fact that content is not superior. Context is actually what takes precedence. So when we think about it, learning maths in Nigeria should be based on the context of Nigeria. And that's why a lot of people push the agenda for learning in our own language, because there is a lot of restriction from the foreign language, which does not take into consideration the context of things, So if you use Yoruba and say, for example, the boy has come, if we were to translate it the way the sequence of the words are, everybody will laugh because it will sound absurd. Why? We have to now start doing what we call learning accommodation, resizing the truth. And that's why a lot of times we don't feel we can tamper with education. And those countries that have been able to tamper with education, they've become exceptional in their outcome. They've taken what they've been told, they've taken what they've been taught, they tampered with it, tweaked it, and they've given birth to things that is now like, a case study and success story.
Now, Rotimi, you keep going deeper. Now you are saying we can tamper with education. I know that Finland tampered with education and they disproved the fact that a child needs to cram times table at the age of 3, which is a major threat when your child in Nigeria is unable to learn times table at the age of 3. You start taking him for deliverance and start running from pillar to post. right? But they believe that education, I mean, you don't come to school until you are like 7 because there are lessons a child should learn at home, which is play. Now, in Estonia, a friend went to Estonia for an education summit, and he said to me that in Estonia, what they have decided to do is to become the hub of, tech in the future. So every child is introduced to tech, and they have normalized the capacity to question. Would we be right to say that maybe our culture has restricted, our capacity to grasp, maybe to tamper with education, for in using your word, for example, because if someone is teaching me something, I mean, I know what I have had to face, because what I see is what I see, and what I see is different from what my leaders are seeing. Now, to channel what I see and challenge their own thoughts respectfully is a problem. People call me rebel. People say I was this, I was that. As a matter of fact, some people even said maybe I was trying to start a church and trying to get their people away. All kinds of stuff. But I was dogged. But there are people who are not as dogged as me, who have literally abandoned the innovation they could have birthed, as a result of cult. Because when they begin to send people to your mother, to your father, and then they call family meeting on your head, at the end of the day, how do you think our culture has affected our capacity to tamper with education? And what do you think is the consequence of not being able to do that?
Thank you very much. Not to sound too controversial, if we think about the core recorded African culture, it actually enables than limits. The problem is that the custodian of the culture, they've now become a stone wall between the culture and the people. And you find out that the beauty of any culture is the agenda that it is pushing. And you find that as a time, a lot of people want to make sure that if we keep people suppressed, right, what should be called transition, they consider it as takeover, especially when they themselves never had the time to question and call that their own failure. So they translate it and say that, look, this is the same thing that must happen. You mustn't take over what you see. You must actually transition. And in the truth of it, if you think about the culture of Africa, right, if you think about some of the things that we've learned, as in before it started having different flavors, it's one culture that teaches resilience, that teaches resourcefulness, that teaches independence, that teaches being inquisitive, right? In fact, so if we take a bit away from our spiritual camp, you think about it, everybody had their own gods, meaning that everybody answered to their own essence, which sometimes we call philosophy. And then they now marry to the overall philosophy of maybe the tribe. And that's why you find out that they name people after the identity they chose. When we think about it as it's a trade, some people are hunters, but they are not just hunters in activity. They are coming from a clan of hunters with a philosophy, meaning that our tribe is responsible for the provision of meat. So beyond trade, the man who is a hunter is expected to hand over to transition his offspring, because their lineage is responsible to contributing to the economy of that village or that community. So it is a pride when I say my name is Ode, in the sense that it's not just to describe who I am and where I'm from, it's describing the mandate on my family, that my family is expected to make sure if food shortage in terms of meat happens in society, then we can trace it to where it's coming from. It's from the Ode or the Ode family. So if you are Odetola, you are people who are expected to make sure that the subsector of the economy is not missing, is not lacking, is not shrinking, or is not faulty. And that's the way it has always been. But guess what? When we embrace formal education, we forgot to see formal education from the eye of the agenda it was pushing. The eye of the agenda it was pushing was sameness. So you find out that a lot of us received Western education in the sameness, where we believe that you are only meant to learn before you are given permission to do. And that's why most people believe that you are not able to, how do I put it now? Most people believe that you are not able to do things except you're certified. And that's where the validation syndrome began. And over the years, if you didn't go to university, you were not qualified as one of the few in society to actually do. And it's actually an equilibrium balance from an agenda that we didn't know. which is why every system of education must evolve based on the preparation of future you're looking for. So when they say Nigeria, for example, is a consuming nation, the truth about it is that even though we are a consuming nation can still be a leverage if we use it to our advantage. Have we trained our people to consume? No. If we're a consuming nation, that means that at the age of 15, every Nigerian should have had their international passport, because by default and design, we've been wired to consume. So we shouldn't be in our nation. We should be able to travel everywhere. And consuming will now become production in itself. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So you think about maybe people who are naturally hospitable from South. Ideal thing is that the kind of university and the kind of emphasis secondary education should be in the South is not necessarily engineering, mathematics, and the likes. We should be reigning hospitality industry, meaning that our goal is to use South and export them to the world. If we keep them in Nigeria, they will end up as houseboys, house helps, and all these little. That's strong economy value. But when we export them to the world, they become porters, concierge, receptionists, and that's where the use of math and English is essential. Think about it this way. When you mention Philippines, even though those people were victim, and the Vietnamese, they're victim of war, guess what? In hospitality industry, 5-star hotel, 4-star hotel, and 3-star hotel, their preference in hiring is for Filipinos. Why? Number one, they are naturally trained, hospitable people. 2, they are trustworthy. They will never steal. Number 3, they are resourceful. So an average receptionist can be a masseuse, meaning that you can put that person to resourcefulness. And that's the difference between when you don't have enough resource. See, we don't need to have everything in the world, but we need to be very resourceful, because it's resourceful people that make the most of the little that they have. But what are we doing today? We are making sure that the people who have been probably the people bringing in one of the biggest GDP and GNP in Nigeria, we are making them more or less people who should be begging for 30,000 naira, 40,000 naira in a month at a diminishing factor. That's why, because education prepared people for the future. Think about it. When Dubai was creating their plan for Dubai 2020, which eventually led to 2021 or 2022, thereabout, guess what happened? They asked themselves in their planning committee that, what do we need? They said, if we are bringing the entire world to us, we need a people who can speak English and who can actually feel the value chain of the retail economy, meaning that they needed bouncers, they needed security, they needed lifeguards, they needed drivers, they needed people in the hotel, they needed people in the malls. And these people must be able to speak an average English. And they found out that the easiest people who can speak English, at least that can speak in a way that people understand very well, were Nigerians. Guess what? Some companies came to Nigeria in partnership with Ministry of Labor in Dubai, and they began to give Nigerians what? Jobs. Of course, we didn't understand the dynamics of it. Some of us abused it, but that was the beginning of the open door and the surge that people started going to Dubai to work. Now, because people were not trained, think about it, if I in a university system, I'm back to the system, now decided to look at the future that was coming, they will now create a university model or a model of education that would drive preparedness, meaning that what we should have seen is a surge in hospitality, where people were not just giving work and 3 weeks orientation training, people were studying. So they will not be at the lower level of the economy chain, but at the top level of the economy chain. We would have been managing hotels, we would have been taking over from the Lebanese, but we're missing the essence of education. Education is not the gathering of degrees till it becomes 360 degrees. It is actually the scenario saying, what is missing in our economy? And then we now come up with a solution that is built on a model that gives birth to a system, which simply means every education system evolves in a matter of cycle of years. So our education calendar, in the real sense of it, it's easy for us to point accusing fingers to our regulators for what you call education mismanagement, which is Nigeria's #1 biggest problem in education. It's not the quality of teaching, that's part of it, but the biggest problem in Africa and Nigeria, to be precise, is education mismanagement. We've not managed education because we're responsible to give birth to systems that will create models. Think about it, and I'll stop there. Everybody knows Montessori education. And you find out that anybody that dreams of having a school, sometimes at the early years, they say, I want to have a Montessori education. A lot of people don't realize that Montessori in itself is a model of education.
Yeah.
And after a system, that there was a learning loss and learning deficit behind certain people who were not really dependent. I mean, who were not independent.
Independent, yeah.
Thinking about it, these people didn't have private education. So this is a private venture education, providing public education. And then they created a model. That model now was institutionalized. It went from the family, it now went to the cities of the world. Now we are raising children out of a Montessori model of education because a system allowed it to thrive. And that's why a lot of times people say the problem of Nigerian education is curriculum. Not necessarily. Curriculum is the footstool. It's almost like the fruit of the model. The model is as a result of the system. It's the system that gives birth to the economy. And the economy is what we call the sector. So when we say education sector, it's a combination of several things. And those things is what make it a whole. Unfortunately, we have a quasi sector in the making because there are many things missing. And that's why we're not seeing the beautiful fruits of it.
Wow. Guys, how are you thinking? How are you feeling already? My seat is really, really hot. Please, let's go to the chat box. What are you feeling like already from what Rotimi? I mean, Rotimi has said a lot of things, already that, and it makes a lot of sense. Lately, Nigeria has been leading the world. Our music, but any Uber in any nation of the world, they are playing Nigerian music. Their FM stereos are playing Nigerian. Then you are asking yourself, why hasn't federal government announced this? Can't we create universities that now, if we are very good in arts, I saw one Nigerian guy, sang opera with Tinubu's name when the for self-subsidy was, that's a talent. And you are wondering what is going on? What is going on? Why can't we
by now, we should be selling talking drum. Talking drum should be retailed. Why? Because it's the root of Afro and it's the root of Juju music. Talking drum should be on sale. It shouldn't be a thing of someone's mastery. It should be democratized. But we don't understand the essence of it. So somebody should have been building a manufacturing plant that is exporting talking drum. Talking drum should not just be artifacts where you buy and hang on the wall. People should be trying to learn from talking drum. And that means that even anybody from Ekiti or anybody from Abeokuta can become someone who can start training people to play talking drum. Before you know it, the way we learn drum set, they learn talking drum. And the person is earning in dollars. But we are missing it. You must have certificate. You must read BSc in music. You must write the rudiments of music. It's not always like that. And so that's the real thing that people need. In fact, when we get this thing right, what you see is we'll see what you call decentralization of Ministry of Education. We'll start having Ministry of Private Schools, start having commissioners. Then we'll start having Ministry of Skilled Schools. That's life schools. Something that you're doing, for example, family reengineering is under Ministry of, is under an education industry. Yeah. And in itself, life school and finishing school. There's professional school. We need to have ministry for all those things. In fact, when I did the research, I came up with 23 industries in the school sector. And in the school sector itself is a subsector of the education sector. And the education sector comprises of almost 64 sectors. But guess what? We only have one person in charge of the Ministry of Education.
And the person knows next to nothing about, like the last minister for education who said that I didn't know anything about education until he was appointed. And that man was not fired till he left, So he set us back for maybe 8 years thereabout. It's so sad. Okay, now, Rotimi, you mentioned the word agenda. Now, Nigerians are regarded as the most educated minority in the US, where I live, for example. But that hasn't translated to power, right? What do you think the problem is? Do you think it's our lack of agenda? Maybe from Africa, that maybe we just found ourselves here. So because the Indians have been able to leverage that, to do great things, right? The Jews have done the same, Japanese have done the same, Chinese have done the same, even the Palestinians have done the same in the UK. We have not, go to UK right now, we are in all the schools. In fact, there's a school in Canada, graduating set, that 90% of the graduates were Nigerians in the same department, right? But it's never translated to power. So you graduate in Canada, for example, with a master's degree, but you're going to likely work in the factory or some funny place till you get you may not even get your desired job. What do you think the problem is, and how do we rectify it? Is it an agenda issue, or what do you think is happening?
Thank you very much. In your words, it's an agenda issue predominantly. And the reason why I said that is a lot of times, it's not when you graduate that you now begin to find clarity and direction. In fact, if you are doing that, you might not get the best of direction. You might just dabble in, any, mini, money, mo. The product of agenda is two results. You either go in to become an amplifier or to become an enabler. And so while you are in university or you're in secondary school or whatever kind of education you're exposed to, even informal education, you must begin to understand, am I sent or am I sending myself to be an enabler of industry? And everyone must think industry, not think work, not think job. You see, job, work, most times is an evidence that someone is not thinking deep. And just like you normally say, Principal, you always challenge people on how they see, because the quality of your sight delivers your mind. So we must enable ourselves to understand. If I go to study, for example, if you use the statistics of the Nigerians in America, most of them, we want to ask them the question, did they go the route of enabling? Did they go the route of amplifying? Most of them don't see themselves that way. And that's why sometimes they don't even aim high. Think about someone like you. You're already making waves. You hit the ground running in the US. Why? You went out, even not just as one. You took two. Few people do that. You came out as an enabler. You're enabling families to find solace and peace and progress. And then you began to amplify the message of family reengineering and values. Now, it will take someone with a heart of boldness to understand that the economy comes when you go in one of those routes, or better still, in two of those routes. If you don't, you'll be left with what you call what's available, which we call jobs and work. Of course, everybody cannot be entrepreneurs, but you must understand that those who enable economies are on the top of the food chain. Those who amplify economies are always on the top of the food chain. It is across sectors. It's not just for one sector, it's across sectors. And that's what we need to start encouraging people. As you pick your choice of course, as you pick your choice of university, as you pick your choice of migration and location, you must decide and begin to find out, am I an enabler or an amplifier? An amplifier will make sure that he has what you call meaningful relationships. So while I feed my head knowledge, I have what you call heart experience, relationship with people, because mine is to amplify industry. And that's why I see most of them going to own corporations that are like marketing, media. Why? Because they are sitting strategically in a position. But when you don't think in that way, you just go about life being tactical. Tactics will not always keep you, especially with the tipsy-turvy nature of economy. But when you are very strategic, guess what happens? You'll be so positioned that you saw the future coming. That's why sometimes some people invest in young people. The reason is because by the time those young people become adults, they are actually in the line of what their fruition, and they become the people that take over for the harvest. So that's the counsel I'll give to anyone. And if you think about it, a lot of people must begin to ask, if I'm going to be an enabler, I'm enabling industry to happen, what kind of business, what kind of job, what kind of skill will I need to have? If I'm amplifying industry, what kind of business skill, job will I need to have? That will be so meaningful that I'm not at the bottom, but I'm at the top.
Well, Rotimi, thank you very much. Now I'm thinking, Rotimi, you know so much. Everyone on this platform is almost like intellectual firepower. We know a lot, but we've not been blessed with a responsive government or a visionary government over the years. Now, many of us started seeing this problem many years ago. You and I have known for over 10 years. They're more than that, right? I mean, it's been 20 years of working in the sector, family life sector, pioneering new initiatives, right? What if our government does not see everything we're talking about, and the agenda is to, because I have a feeling that the agenda of Nigerian government has always been perpetually to perpetuate illiteracy, because the more illiterate the people are, the more they can think, and the more they can think, the more they keep voting for the wrong people. And I go, I mean, and this is not to put anyone down. I remember that what's it called now? The former prime minister of, is this still the prime minister of Israel, right? Benjamin Netanyahu. He gave a speech that I consider to be one of the best speeches ever given, about the heritage of Israel. And, many of us listening to it in Nigeria, we're clapping and we're like, whoa, we pray that God gives us a president like this. And in Israel, my friend said they were trashing him. to say that was below bar, that he couldn't measure up with the Shimon Peres and David Ben-Gurion, who were the leaders and the fathers of modern day Israel. And they were, and I was like, what's going on with you guys? And my friend said, praise, it's because Israel is 99% literate. So you cannot bamboozle anybody and just deliver the minimum, and I felt that's another level where a people have refused to settle for mediocrity. I mean, but look at northern Nigeria, where, block votes. I mean, someone religious that is going to tell people to vote. So the average guy there cannot even think for himself of what he's going to do. And even in the southern part of Nigeria, we talk about, it's the Yorubas that is most rule, it's Igbo. Those are the kind of conversations we're having at this age and time. So let's assume that these things, they don't see it. Is there an alternative to achieving the same result? Can an individual or maybe a group run this agenda? And I know that there's a problem of people collaborating, again, which I think is part of the problem our culture has given to us. When we sing songs like Emini number one, Iwani number two, Emini Mama, Koko, Jerry, Zagbarado, that's subliminal conditioning that prevents people from working together, because it then becomes, I don't care what happens to other people as long as I'm fine, right? So what are the other ways that this can be achieved without, because come to think, very soon now we're going to be 50, right? Are we going to say, okay, it's because of the way the company is structured? Are we going to be giving excuses, or what are the other ways that this can be achieved?
All right, thank you. A very interesting question. I think one of the things that we need to start with, which I will call the low-hanging fruits, before we even think of collaboration, is showcasing. A lot of people need to identify few people who are actually, doing amazing things. It doesn't have to be the size, it's the showcase. A lot of times we wait for the size before we showcase, and it's the other way around. You don't know how big people perceive you until you share, spread your message. We have been quiet about our success stories in our own little ways, and so it makes it easier for people not to think anything is happening. So think about the House of Saviors. Imagine that a lot more people. Imagine it was 10,000 people listening to this today, or 20,000 people. We need a lot of people to showcase. The little that we can do is to showcase. Number two. You like using one word, praise. You said there's always something about covert and overt.
Yeah.
So I think we might need to adopt that principle. The truth about it is education in Nigeria is heavily politicized. It's not policy-based education. It is politics-based education. And so we need to find a way where we need to get people get jobs in Ministry of Education, in SUBEB, in local government, and all the sub institutions where the real change that will happen, the real rot is along those lines. I've been privileged to travel to 29 states in Nigeria, train schools, teachers, owners, regulators, and of course, I've been part of some state policy reforms of education. And I keep seeing the fact that it is on purpose. It is not that they don't know. A lot of people are actually nominated based on politics-based, not policy-based. Number three is that most of the time, it is also a chase of economic power. Think about if we had like 1,000 of praise for thinking like you, bold like you, asking questions like you, and they are in strategic position, and they now have money. Not they have ideas, they have money. And that's the thing that the political class fears the most. And that's the tool that they have to corrupt the ones that are even bright minds. When they bring them together, they put money and give them offers they can't refuse. So we need to get to a point where we need to start pushing the commercial value chain of education. And there are practical ways to do it. Let's use the school sector, for example. Let me give you an example. A lot of people should not, a lot of people think, I love kids, the next thing they want to start school. It might be more profitable for you to run a socks industry that sells not just Nigeria, but West Africa. And then you'll be able to get the economic power that you can actually make certain meaningful changes. So there are many industries that actually enable the school industry. Some people might decide to say, okay, you know what? The economy is, the foreign exchange. Some people can decide to go into the uniform industry. That's an industry in the school value chain. Guess what? In Lagos, we have 18,900 private schools registered. Whenever we think of solution, we should think in numbers. And then we think about it in Nigeria as a whole. People should start thinking of skill institutions, where those institutions will compete favorably with university. It is not a must to go into university, but it's a must to have skill. In fact, the future is predicated on skill, not institution. It's the skill you have, not the institution you went to. And so people should begin to identify the commercial value chain of education. There are many, and that can actually mean identify how you enable even society. Think about it, for example. A lot of people traveling to Nigeria, and sometimes for the first time, they navigate around Lagos or wherever they arrived to or at, and there's no structured engagement in the front line of tourism. Schools already have an ecosystem for that. Schools already have buses. They have school runs. Most of their buses and schools are not used during the weekends or during the evenings. Think about it. I was in Rwanda I just got back from Rwanda. I spent about 2 weeks there, and I saw the way things were being, organized there. And I'm thinking to myself that, do you know that the volume of people who come into Nigeria every time, if a particular school or an individual decides to say, I want to support government to be able to help ease out navigation and logistics in the place of tourism. That's why there's an ecosystem. Think about merchandising. We go to beaches, we pay for gate fee. How many Nigerian flags are people seeing at the beach? How many Nigerian hats are people seeing at the beach? And those are things that people take for granted, but a lot of people with commercial power, with economic power. So the first thing any teacher, any school owner, or any stakeholder that is thinking about change in education must think of the value in the commercial chain of industry. When we come together, then we can do without government in a way. And we'll do it in such a way that is so organized that government will think about it. Private schools, the way they started was in a subtle way. And then they began to help unsolicitedly. They were outsourcing education of the entire community to the private schools. But now the private schools have stopped thinking. They are now like businesses without industry. The growth phase is that we need to get these businesses to migrate to industry. And then when we amplify or we enable, we begin to see more employment, we begin to see more coverage, and then we begin to see better things happen.
Thank you very much, Rotimi. I'm not going to keep you unnecessarily, but I would like to know what are the critical opportunities that currently exist in the educational sector? I mean, gaps. You talked about 23, industries within the sector. So if there are people here now, Rotimi has challenged all of you. You see, 56 people are on this call. So all your 56 people, go and get 1,000 people so that we can get 10,000 people listening to us every Sunday. Okay, guys, we have to invite people and bring them in because there's so much that can be done with numbers. Imagine if we had 10,000 people on this call right now. I'm just going to appoint Rotimi as Minister for Education for House of Saviors, and tell him to go and practicalize all these theories he has shared with us and get a team working. Because you see, where there's a will, there's a way. That's how I grew. That's how I developed. Where there's a will, there's a way. So I've never waited for everything to be perfect before starting out. I've put pressure on myself to start out, advertise programs before content is even ready. And that's how we got here. So one of the things I hate the most is when my destiny is in the hand of someone else. Because guys, think for a moment. If federal government is not listening to us, we can create a clan system here. If we have 10,000, we can make villages out of 10 families, 10 families, 10 families, create an educational system, create a curriculum, determine the future we want our children to have, and work towards it. It can be done, guys. So it's not, the systems isn't, I know how to do that, but we need numbers to do this. So you guys have to make a commitment to now go all out and be bringing in people. Right. Rotimi, can you talk to us about some of the opportunities that exist in this sector that, so there are people here who want to play in the educational sector globally, right? What should they pay attention to? What are some of the areas? Because everybody wants to start a school. And I don't know why people want to start a school. Because I think, I don't even, the infrastructure and resources needed to start a school, the manpower, you and I know we did a consulting job together. You remember a school that has 300 people, staff. and we ask what is the vision of the school. That vision is on the wall every day. Only 5 people could tell us the vision of the school, right? And this is a major problem, right? So can you share with us, because everybody that thinks of I want to make impact in education wants to go start a school, wants to start with a creche. So you have schools in Ajangbadi, you have schools, some that should not even be a school, right? So we multiply error, mess up children, thinkers, non-thinkers, setting up schools, right? And school owners who cannot be questioned. It's a mystery. You're running a school, you can't be questioned. So how do you innovate? So what are the other business options or gaps or places that spaces that people can occupy, within the sector?
Thank you very much. I normally use certain P's to help people frame their thoughts. I always say that the problem of education is not what is faulty or broken, is what is missing. So think about anything that can give people passion and pleasure within that sector, and come up with a solution. That's why you find a lot of people are thinking of a bigger concept of the real estate of education. You're thinking of things like pool arena. We don't have enough of that. And in a pool arena, it has sub-level of economy. You have academy of pool. You can actually help people raise people who represent Nigeria in tournaments and Olympics. It also has multi-purpose use. That's general, and that's also something that can, add to people's measurement of entertainment and leisure. We need to think about dwelling more on the place of the skill institution, just like the examples I raised. India has supplied the world one of the top numbers in CEOs, especially within the tech space. So we can decide to say, okay, Nigeria, there's what's stopping us from actually having dance schools and dance instructors where we can actually get people to learn our African steps and learn African culture, in a way where that in itself is a life skill school academic kind of thing, and we begin to say that, okay, this is what we have that is unique to us. Let's train the world. We are the next best story waiting to happen. So these are things that people should look out for. We need to be able to create more things that are in the area of also solving problems. So you find out that behavioral management is going to be a big-time economy in the futures to come. Recently, was it last year or early this year, a particular company was awarded $90 million. They are the producers of Akili. Akili is like not Nigerian, but an African animated series, and it's in Yoruba, it's in Igbo, it's in English, and sometimes I think Pidgin. And they just gave them for content creation. Content creation is a budding industry. Some of the things we've talked about to cascade it down. A lot of churches are looking for people who can create content to be able to gravitate the next knowledge and the next culture of faith within Nigeria and Africa to the coming generation in an applicable manner. So these are things that people should begin to think of, having content creation hubs, studios, businesses that, of course, the demand is increasing, and the changes that are happening with AI and the likes. So these are a few things that you can leverage on to be able to make meaningful, economic value and impact in the short term, in the midterm, and ultimately in the long run.
Thank you very much, Rotimi. House of Saviors, if you have any specific question for Rotimi, please, you can put it in the chat box. I'm going to ask this question. Do you think Africa needs an intentional curriculum to produce the outcomes we desire? And can we even start from families? My family has a family curriculum. We have a family educational system. I developed that curriculum. So when people ask me, because I'm hardly with the children these days, and I always say to people in the first formative years of their lives, I was not absent, I was there. But now that I have to do a lot of traveling, I have a curriculum. Some of the videos I play in House of Saviors, are their videos? Are they part of their curriculum? So because I've developed all kinds of things for them that I just pick from it and come and play here, right? And they have videos they watch 10 minutes every day. And then we discuss application and what have you. No. So do you think Africa can develop a curriculum? And, how can we, because again, if I go back to how we started, who do we want an African child to be? Is superior to any school this school is the best school. It's even superior to grades, because it's a simple question. If a child is kidnapped by ISIS and that child is with ISIS for 6 years, can that child ever become a man of God and come out and say, bless you, I bless you in the name of Jesus? Can never be. So it means there is a system and the potency of the curriculum they go through that radicalizes them. So why are we not able to produce that result? Is it that we don't have the willpower, or we're not willing to go through the process, or we have been destroyed? And I say this, I think the concept of miracle is one of the worst things that happen to us, that it can happen instantly. So everybody wants instantly. Everybody wants, is our year of something. What can we do as a continent? Because Africa worries me.
Thank you. So to make it complete, I think we need curriculum. We also need a command, which I call mandate. It's not the name of the course, it is the driving essence of what you're going to become. So while you might study accounting, the point is we don't want to put too much emphasis on the course. We want to put emphasis on the mandate on that child. And that's why families can do it, even if government have not woken up to that responsibility, that we are raising you to become. Just like you say, saviors, we are raising to become this kind of savior in this kind of sector. So the person is programmed, and then the curriculum is now following that pattern. The truth about it is that it's only then that child is raised to meet and dominate an industry. The formal education, the curriculum is heavily content-based, not experiential-based, but most of the time it doesn't lead to industry. What do we need for someone to be a pilot today? That curriculum that will make the person come out and ultimately just become a pilot. That's what we need. So we want a situation where the curriculum and the command makes them not just to meet industry, but to dominate industry. So in our everydayness, in the toys we buy, in the things we do, in the things we refrain from, it is because they are wired to go out there to become. And that's the reason why we send our children to school. It's not so that they'll be educated. No, because there are different forms of ways to get educated, but we send them to become. Now that become, you fill in the gap. To become what? ... And that's the challenge I'm pushing to everyone. And that's also pushing to myself, that we are raising ourselves and raising the children that we have to become. And that's only when Africa will feel that they are on a mission. And you begin to see industry dominance, industry takeover, and where we can't, we'll recreate the industry ourselves. And that's what happened in the music industry. And everybody initially was trying to get to a Grammy, but later on just changed the course to say, we want to get the Grammys of the people's heart. And so you find African musicians, they have won Grammys in the heart of the people, even though the organization of the Grammy Awards have not necessarily given all of them Grammys. And so at the end of the day, what's the use of Grammy if I already have the people who actually make up the Grammys? And that's the reason why you see that they understand it, and we need to replicate it across the divide, that we are raising people to become. Curriculum and a command.
Okay, thank you very much, Rotimi. Does anyone have a question for Rotimi before I take his final word? But there is something that we're going to do. I've already written it down. We're going to do an House of Saviors Education Fair, and we will get Rotimi to take one of more sessions, at that fair, because I think more people need to hear this. But beyond hearing, action, I've already started drawing my flow charts while he was talking of what we can do almost immediately, and some of the things we can do. Okay, does anyone have a question for him before I take his final word? Does anyone? Okay, someone is saying, thanks for this enlightenment. The French study and learn in French, Germany in Dutch, English in English. What does it take for us to learn in Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba? I believe learning in English is limiting to our identity and values, which we are losing rapidly, and what we export is in English, just like so many others. What sets us apart? Rotimi, that's a question for you.
All right, thank you very much. For us to be able to adopt this holistically, we need content creators. So what happens is all these other things have text, so you have all these books, all these textbooks in English. So we need people who are translators or who can use the power of technology or gather people to now begin to recreate these things, in the text format. Those are the things that drive learning. So as long as you don't have textbooks, you don't have handbooks, you don't have workbooks, you don't have worksheets, you don't have learning SML, LMS management system in our language, it might become a big time issue. We need competitions to reinforce our language so that it's not seen as vernacular in a negative. It's not seen like you're not tush. That's the only way we can adopt it. But that's the reason why government is not totally pushing. They're hiding behind the fact that we don't have the content in the text format. And until we do that, it might not be widespread. But I agree with you. It will be good to learn in our language, university and school system and subjects.
Okay. Someone is asking NED and NERDC, UBEC, SUBEB, and you say, where is the place of all our educational regulations or regulators in all of this?
Well, they play a critical role. If you call things principalities, some of the things mentioned there, they are the principalities in the education system. So for example, there are certain courses you don't have in university today just because if they were to award that, you will now have younger lecturers who never even had an MSc. Why? For example, how many professors can teach social media or digital marketing? So you now have a guest lecturing and all that. It will change the entire structure. And so they are just here as gatekeepers as opposed to custodians. So one of the things we can do is just like what Praise suggested, we need to start having developmental conferences that put them on the hot seat, because it's developmental conferences that tackle the issues. For example, why is school assessment still the way it is? For example, why is it that there are certain subjects that still exist? Why is it that we're having at the basic education level and the junior secondary level, why are we still doing 14, 16 subjects? To what end? We start asking ourselves, since we are actually adopting the British model of education, okay, why is it that we cannot have our university years shrunk into 3 years? Why is this, why is this, that, and so many other things? And then they will begin to answer, not because it's rhetorics, because it's something we can hold them to. And then we see best practice, better practices, and we see innovations, and we're asking, why is it that our education system has not been digitized and automated? Even when it comes to regulatory supervision and school quality and assurance, you find out that a lot of them still say it has to be analog, even when people that they are assessing have migrated to an automated level. So these are the things. What are the kind of fundings, And then in the funding space, they're saying that if they're going to fund education from a grant perspective, we must have a government that is ready to do at least 15% of its budget to education. And when we say education, we're not talking about infrastructure, we're talking about real-time funding of education. So this development conference is the way to go, because that's the only thing that will pull them out. Most of the other conferences don't speak to them, so you don't find them on the seats. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rotimi. Deji says also, as an architect, I work with artisans, and they are dwindling every day as they feel belittled in society. They cannot even date. They prefer to be scammers. What does it take to set up artisanal schools that can absorb the uneducated? Maybe you wanted to say the unschooled. Technical colleges don't work out as their graduates are discriminated against. Yeah.
I think the easiest thing for us to do is start academies. Academies with proof of concept gets easy accreditation. If we begin to think of the place of TVC, that's technical vocation setups, we might be caught in the web of regulation and framework. They might ask too much of us that we even say, look, we're trying to contribute, and they're asking an arm and a leg. So start out as an academy, show your proof of concept by maybe 1 or 2 people you've raised or a few people that have come out of you, or better still, use the academy to serve as a hub where people now prefer your services, or the artisans from your service and academy to the general, and then that becomes your case for change. And it's easier to get registered that way. And also sometimes I tell people that pick a line of business. So for example, that's another idea that I would like to share. There is a big time business in the sawmill industry. And if there's anybody who would like to galvanize it in a more professional way, in a well-marketed form with proper order and delivery, you can use that to raise artisans and train them, and you get so much money in the sawmill business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rotimi, for blessing us and for sharing with us. We're going to put our pen to paper and we're going to come back to you. We will do a development education fair, definitely. And we would ensure that we'll grow our numbers. People have commitments already. Now, what's your final word to us on the future of the African child? In scripting the African child for global dominance. People have done seminars. They've recommended all kinds of things that I think are very spooky because there's no practicality in many of them. I mean, if they can, all their recommendations, why have they not done it? So what would be your recommendation, a final word to us on how to script the African child for global dominance?
Thank you so much. My final words would be that we need to raise our children and ourselves to be executors. The narrative behind us is that we talk and we don't. So we need to switch it. We need to start doing. And one of the ways to do that, turn those dreams into projects. Look at it as a prize. Check up what's the price you need to pay for that prize, and then go for it. Once you do that, you'll get more execution, and in the end of the day, we'll have more belief that we can change things ourselves.
Thank you very much, Rotimi. Please, House of Saviors, can we appreciate Rotimi Eitayo? Rotimi, we're going to definitely get back to you on what we need to do, how we can take this to the next level. But thank you very much for obliging us. Happy Father's Day once again. My regards to your warm, lovely wife and your children. God bless you. Okay, Temilola, over to you. I think I'm done with my duty, so you can take it away from here.